This is a data privacy detective. I bet most of us think that what we think about is private, that nobody can read our brains. Well, let me tell you, things are changing a bit. You may have followed one of the things Elon Musk talked about not so long ago, that one of his companies has developed a way for people to directly use their thoughts to do things, such as to play chess or to express their views through their brains. Well, now we have the brain doing the talking. That's very helpful for paralyzed people, disabled people, people who can't speak or write. So there are benefits to the research that's been going on, and then more recently, the practical applications of letting people express themselves and act upon their expressions through their brain. But like everything, almost everything in life, there's a dark side to the light side, and that's the sharing of how we think. And when we do that, and it becomes data that can be written down in zeros or ones or language, however it's done, then our privacy within our brains is suddenly at risk. So just assume that's the case now, because believe me, it's increasingly so. And then learn how Colorado became the first state of the United States to single out neural data, brain data, and make it the same as sensitive data, such as medical information and financial information, other things that require extra protection beyond just, let's say, our email address or our postal address, which is generally not considered sensitive data. So let's take a look at this act. It's really quite short. Usually I don't do this, but let's literally go through the act. The first thing you had were a number of legislative declarations stating that the people of Colorado, of course, regard privacy as a fundamental right and an essential element of what freedom is, that the state constitution has privacy provisions, that technology has advanced to the point, as I've suggested, that there's been an enormous growth in the volume and ways in which personal data is generated, collected, stored, and analyzed. And that has good and bad elements to it, risk and reward. That technology increasingly collects data about our bodily and mental functions, and the amount of this data is increasing in volume and in its sensitivity. That there are neurotechnologies, including devices, that can now record, interpret, and even alter the response of a person's central or peripheral nervous system to the internal or external environment. And that obviously raises concerns about even the ability to manipulate brain activity. There are findings that data about the human brain's activity and the rest of the nervous system, we call it neural data, Neural, is extremely sensitive. And it can reveal very intimate information about us, about our mental state, our emotions, or the way our cognitive functions happen. There's a declaration that every human brain is unique. And so neural data is very specific to each individual from whom it's collected. That the collection of neural data involves the involuntary disclosure of information. Always. Even if individuals say, okay, you can collect and process my data for, let's say, a narrow use, health test of a new vaccine, how you're reacting to something. But in doing that, we're unlikely to be fully aware of the content and the kind of information we're really sharing when we say, yes, I'll agree to that. There's a declaration that neurotechnology users really can't decide what specific neural information they'd like disclosed and others withheld, and how it's going to be decoded. That neurotechnologies are no longer confined to research and rehabilitation, that things are being rolled out in the real world based on this information, that neurotechnologies are now employed and deployed in medical settings to utilize the surgical implantation of invasive devices. All this is happening. It's not science fiction. That there are invasive and non-invasive wearable neurotechnologies that are used in medical settings. And some are also regulated by health data privacy laws, but many are outside of medical settings. And so they're considered consumer products, like buying a television set. And they operate really without regulation or data protection standards. Hence, the legislature of Colorado declared unanimously, almost, only one person dissented, that there was a need to amend the Colorado Privacy Act, adopted it became effective in 2023. And so the Colorado Privacy Act was amended. It will be effective later the year, in the year of 2024, 90 days after this version of the legislature resigns for the year, concludes. And biological data becomes a defined term, and neural data becomes a defined term. Now, biological data, meaning data generated by the technological processing, measurement, analysis of a person's biological, genetic, biochemical, physiological, or neural properties, compositions, or activities, or of one of our personal body or bodily functions. And then, this is quite important, that which data is used or intended to be used singly or in combination with other personal data for identification purposes. And then neural data is defined as information that is generated by the measurement of the activity of an individual's central or peripheral nervous system, and that can be processed by or with the assistance of a device. Now there's no qualifying which data is used after it about identification purposes. So neural data is separated from biological data in this statute. Well, with this, what really then happens is biological data and neural data both become defined as sensitive data, and they're added to the list of sensitive data that already was in the Colorado Privacy Act. Well, there you have the act. Well, let's think about this. The Neuro Rights Foundation, which is involved in monitoring and promoting things that will be beneficial to the privacy of neuro rights, brain rights, think of it that way. They issued a report not long ago finding that many of the existing consumer neurological devices, watches we wear, things that monitor glucose for diabetic persons and so on, that out of 30 of the devices that they reviewed, neurotechnology devices, nearly every company out of those 30 appeared to have access to neural data and provided no meaningful limitations to this access. So companies weren't doing it on their own, and this was a problem. And so the Neuro Rights Foundation very much backed the Colorado law. The Colorado law, as I noted, cites a lack of regulation over neurotechnology that does not apply the way HIPAA covers a lot of medical information. And even there, HIPAA doesn't protect every entity that uses medical information. It's really more focused on the collection by the shortcut to say the health sector itself. But that data leaks and data spreads and data is shared, and once it's been released, there's no guarantee one will ever get it back. That's the way digital data is. And that means the consumers are likely unaware the extent and the uses of data collected. And as it goes into this business of collecting what's in our brains, you can see the real concern here. Now, big data was well aware of the process of this bill through the Colorado legislature, and no doubt they were responsible for limiting the biological data definition to be that which is data gathered to determine a person's identity, not if it was data that was governed to do other things, such as just research, and it maybe use only anonymous or pseudonymous data, as it's called, where the gatherer really didn't care about the identity of a person. But remember that the neural data didn't have that qualifier in it. And so Meta and other Google, other companies looking at this act may be tempted to say that maybe a lawsuit's needed. Who knows? And they've certainly said that it's not giving enough time to let this act go into effect 90 days after the legislature adjourns in 2024. Well, that's one set of issues. Academia, universities were also opponents of this act, because brain data obviously is something that's quite important to the research that goes on within universities about what is going on within our brains as we do things. This is vital to ongoing academic research. And so they may be comforted by the qualifier that's in the biological data, but not without one in the neural data. They're concerned. Can they collect this? Well, remember that the Colorado Privacy Act doesn't say you can't do this at all. You can't think about or collect data that is in someone's brain. What you have to do with sensitive data, as it's now about to be defined, is to get prior consent. Odd that the legislator had a finding that we're really not very good at deciding what to consent to or not, but that's at least there's going to have to be prior consent rather than the opt-out about certain other data. And that may be the answer to this about how to handle the need for ongoing research about brainwaves and to help people that may only be able to act through their brains rather than through paralyzed limbs or other organs of the body. A lot to be done here. But let's think for a minute. Is the Colorado Act going to be the first new kind of brainwave, a neural data wave? The Senate committee in California has already unanimously adopted a very similar type of provision. We'll see if California will act soon. I predict it will. Minnesota's been working on this for some time. Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, Mexico, major countries in the Americas, and Spain, part of course, Europe, already have in their constitutions or their acts, their statutes, provisions about neural data. So it's coming. It's just a question of how broad it'll be and whether we'll view this as something that requires more than just a consent. Or certainly more than an opt-out type approach. I don't think you'll see that adopted throughout the world. No emerging international standard at this point. Will it be adequate? Will any legislation be adequate to protect our brains? Let's make up one. Let's say a person thinks for a minute they hate a political candidate so much their brain thinks, boy, if I were by this person, I'd pull out a gun and shoot him or her. Of course, no one has ever thought that, have they? But let's just say that, and then there's no action taken. Is that an indictable thought? Will that be collected and monitored? Will more totalitarian countries in the United States think, oh, this is a good way to use neural data? We shall see. But this is no longer fiction. This is something legislatures have to deal with. The executive branch of governments have to deal with. Like everything, technology isn't good or bad. It's a set of tools, often used for good, sometimes used for bad. There are risks involved. And with that, I'll conclude as I always do, and you'll understand especially why, perhaps, in this podcast. Protecting your personal data privacy. Protecting, in this case, what you think about begins with you.